Greetings, everyone, and welcome to the Four Pillars Temple Spot ritual. This evening, we are finishing out the elements. So up until this point, we've already completed all four of the elements, and tonight I will be doing a presentation on the element of spirit. So let's go ahead and dive right in. So the element of spirit is the sort of the basis from which all of the other elements come, right? And it's also the glue which keeps all of the elements together, but also in balance of one another and provides structure and the framework for the world, the cosmos, the entire system, right? So this is the sort of the energy that underlies all of the universe. It is the great animator of the universe. It's kind of that thing that precedes all things and that thing that sort of gives life and animates all parts of our life and our existence. It is also seen as the ultimate reality. A lot of people call it the ultimate reality. And it is seen also as, again, that essence which pervades the universe. So there are several aspects of spirit and several symbols of spirit that I want to talk about. So when we talk about the other elements, right, air, fire, water, earth, they're very tangible, right? We can look at the water and say this is water. We can look at stone, or we can look at a crystal, or we can look at salt upon the altar and say this is earth, right? With spirit, we don't really have that same level of understanding about it. It's not tangible, right? It's the spiritual reality. And so in many ways, it's depicted in abstract ways, without form, without shape, without color, without sense. It also includes all forms, all shapes, and all senses, right? So it's kind of all and nothing at the same time because we can't put it into words. In modern metaphysics, the element is often depicted by using the pentacle, right? The five-pointed star with the circle around it. That represents all five elements and the element of spirit. Or the hexagram, which we'll talk about in just a moment when I kind of break it apart for you. And then, of course, the sacred syllable, Om, right? As we know, Om is that syllable that's the sound of the birthing of the world, the sound of creation. And so that is kind of the universal sound, which represents the element of spirit as well. Let's see. The element of spirit often refers to the ether or aether, which is actually a Greek word that means the upper air. So it's the realm of the sky, essentially. You know, when the ancient Greeks were talking about the fifth element, ether, aether, they were talking about the sky. They were talking about that sort of atmosphere that was above our heads. Another word that is often used to describe the element of spirit is akasha, right? We talk about that. Also, it's a Sanskrit word which has a very similar meaning. It also means air, sky, etheria, right? Or ether. So akasha, ether, they're all the same thing. And essentially what it means is it's that sort of quality of life that is unknowing, necessarily intangible, etc. So these are some of the depictions of spirit. Of course, the pentacle, which is first and foremost common way of depicting the element of spirit. It's the primary symbol, of course, of our faith, the Wiccan faith. The symbol is often used as a talisman of protection. So it depicts the four elements with the pointing, the uppermost point pointing upward represents spirit or akasha. This symbol also represents the idea of mind over matter, and it is the use of one's own spiritual energies to manipulate energy in the world around us. Now, one of the other major ways, like I mentioned a moment ago, is the hexagram or the six-pointed star. Hexagram or sexagram, as it's sometimes called, is a six-pointed star, which is also called the Seal of Solomon, the Star of David, or the Shamuka, which is a symbol used all over the world. For millennia, it's been used. In the modern craft, this symbol is actually used with the understanding coming from alchemy, right? So when you look at the six-pointed star, as you see on the screen, below, you'll see each of the four alchemical symbols for each of the elements. And if you combine them and you overlay them, what you'll get is the six-pointed star. So if you break those pieces up, it represents all four elements. You put it together and it represents all four elements plus spirit, giving you the totality of existence. And so the six-pointed star represents all of the elements. Here is, of course, a symbol, the Om symbol, right? So in the first degree of the Karelian tradition teachings, we learned about how everything is made up of energy, right? Energy vibrates. That is the nature of energy. And it also has specific frequencies. These frequencies can be interacted with and used by practitioners to make change in our lives, right? That's kind of the basis of what is magic. However, there is a direct link between energy, between sound, and between vibration, right? So think about that for a moment. One of the things that I do when doing blessings and purifications is using sound modalities. And the reason why is because when we use a high level or a high frequency sound, what it does is it doesn't necessarily send away these negative energies, but it transmutes them, right? It brings their energy and their vibration up to a different level. And the sacred syllable Om is also another way of representing spirit, but also interacting with spirit, right? When we chant the element, the syllable of Om, we're resonating. Our personal resonance is resonating with that larger spiritual sense, that larger spiritual element. Let's go ahead and take a look here. One second. I'm going to try and reshare the screen here. Okay, it looks like it's sharing at this point. Can everyone see me? Are we good? Oops, I went back. Perfect. For some reason, it didn't load right away. There we go. Okay, so just kind of going through the slides real quick, back to where we were. Again, that sacred syllable Om. Om is also the sound, again, at the start of creation, and spirit also is sound. So let's talk about some of the correspondence, some of the things that we can use to maybe relate with spirit or utilize the essence of spirit. You know, when we talk about magic, we talk about this whole system of correspondences, and then what we can do to kind of interact with these correspondences to help us, you know, use the energies of that element. So when it comes to spirit, of course, being the combination of all of the elements, generally the direction is center, above and below. It's kind of this sort of axis, right? The color a lot of times is white, violet, or even crystal clear. These are the energies, the colors that we use to interact with that element of spirit. Generally, it is non-gendered, so it's not male or female. It's not necessarily androgynous either. It's kind of just no gender and all genders at the same time. Some of the tools that are used in circle to help us kind of represent this element are things like the cauldron. The cauldron is represented as kind of the womb of creation from which all magic comes from. So the cauldron represents, sometimes it can represent water, more often it represents spirit, right? Also, the pentacle is a great way of representing spirit. Another tool that we don't often think of that could potentially be used is ourselves, right? We, as the practitioner, are the tool, the magic making tool. And so we represent spirit in the altar. We represent spirit in the ritual space. That's why a lot of times there isn't another representation. On the altar with me today for our ritual, I included a diamond, right? So I have my own diamond here to kind of represent that element of spirit as well. Kind of the totality of all things. When we talk about the kind of spirits or the kind of beings that would be associated with the element of spirit, of course, it would be any celestial, angelic, or divine beings, right? I already mentioned that, so we'll just move ahead. Here's a list of some of the stones that might be associated with the element of spirit. So I took some liberties here in including certain things. And I put in parentheses some of the associated things which may come along with these stones. So for example, alexandrite, amber, amethyst, angelite, coarse bloodstone, blue lace agate, desert rose, citrine, diamond, lapis lazuli, opal, peridot, obsidian, clear quartz, right? All of these turquoise, all of these things are have the quality or have some spiritual qualities, whether it's spirituality in general, spiritual growth, whether it's peace, which I consider peace to be personally to be a spiritual energy, a spiritual element. So anything that had to do with rebirth, renewal, spirituality, peace, I included, so these aren't directly, correspondence for spirit, but they are mostly related, at least from my opinion. And so some of the herbs and trees that we use are listed here as well. I didn't go into as much depth just for sake of space to include, but essentially it's the same. If that herb or tree had a similar correspondence, again, like peace, spiritual purification, spiritual things, I included them here. And then I listed the herbs as well underneath that, things like angelica, dandelion, columbine, dill, fennel, heliotrope, holy basil, naturally, rose, sage, St. John's wort, all of these things that we have very much readily available to us, I think. And then in the tarot, the Correllian tradition separates the major arcana into several sections. And so in the tarot, they identify the star, the moon, the sun, and judgment, which they list in what they call the spirit quartet. So those four cards are related to the element of spirit. So just some basic correspondence to help you to get in touch with that element as you go forward. Including this quote from the Tao Te Ching. It says, "The Tao that can be understood is not the eternal cosmic Tao, just an idea that can be expressed in words and is not the infinite idea. Yet these two things, matter and spirit, so different in nature, have the same origin." And so I really saw this and felt that it really connected with the essence and the element of spirit, this idea that all things are coming from that center. And so whatever we're calling it, whether we're calling it the God and Goddess, whether we're calling it the Tao, no matter what it is that we're calling it, these are the same things that we're talking about, right? I want to shift here and talk a little bit about some philosophy and how maybe it relates to the element of spirit, because I think when we start talking about spirit in general, that's when we kind of start getting into spiritual discussions, right? Spiritual matters. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about the philosophy behind it and maybe how some of that philosophy and classical philosophy parallels with Wicca in general, and in particular the Correllian tradition. So many philosophies and religions have grappled with this very simple question. How could a single entity, God, right, the divine, produce the multiplicity and varied universe? Right? This is a really common question, because if God is one, and as Correllians, and I would say as Wiccans in general, we believe that God is a single energy, right? Spirit, right? Whether it's God or Goddess, it's all kind of part of spirit. We can't separate and say, oh, this energy is Odin, and this energy is Pan, and this energy is Freya, and this energy is Athena, right? We can't do that. It's all part of the same energy. And the Correllian tradition teaches that doctrine on the diamond, right? This idea that the diamond is the totality of spirit, and each of the facets of that diamond is the face or a face of the divine that we can interact with. So if that's true, and if all energy and all spirit is one spirit, how can a single entity produce the multiplicity and the varied universe, right? So some philosophers have some ideas about that. So I have a mistype here, so I apologize. So when we talk about Neoplatonic theory, philosophy rather, we're not talking about Plato. I mistyped there. We're talking about Plotinus. So Plotinus was a different philosopher, different from Plato, but Neoplatonic, it sounds like we're talking about Plato. So the Neoplatonic philosophical movement, which was again found by Plotinus, left an impact on the way that we perceive the elements in the modern occult movement. The use of the four elements was first used by the Sicilian philosopher Epimodocles, who referred to these as roots. They were kind of the roots of the universe, right? It was Plato who later took that idea and used the term elements to refer to the way that the universe was created and how it was formed. From his idea, the Neoplatonic school of philosophy formed later after that, which then came to kind of elaborate on this idea. So in this philosophy, very basically, if I can be succinct, the universe was created by what they call the first cause. And the first cause was depicted as being the very first being in existence, the eternal, self-sufficient, perfect, and of no material or non-material universe. Al-Farabi, who is an Islamic Neoplatonic philosopher, saw that the first cause as being the entity of pure reason, in this way being the mind, right? And so what had happened is the Greek writings and the Greek philosophical writings had come over to Arabia. And when they came over to Arabia, they influenced a lot of the thinking and the beliefs in Arabia. And so when Eastern Europe went into the Dark Ages, all that information was lost, but it really wasn't lost to everybody. The Arabs knew about it. And so they continued to mull these things over and really try to understand the philosophy around this. And so essentially what they're saying is that first cause, that first being in the universe was thought. Essentially, it was the mind. It was this sort of mental state of the divine, right? In Neoplatonic thought, the universe from the first cause separated systematically through the various stages and resulted in the production of lesser beings as the process continued. So started off with these larger beings and then got lesser and lesser and lesser as the process went on. So first there was the nous, which were separated from the first cause or the first creator. They were exact copies of the first creator, and they were also archetypal. This may be the origin of the Corellian prayer, which says, "There is one power in the universe, and we are the perfect manifestation of that power." According to the Neoplatonists, there is no such thing as evil, as it does not exist as in a separate form from good, but in the absence of goodness. So I want you to think about that for a second. Evil doesn't exist in its own separate way. It's simply the absence of good. That is where evil exists, right? So does that sound familiar to any of you, like in terms of your own personal beliefs or maybe the Corellian tradition or in Wicca in general, right? We don't believe in evil necessarily. It doesn't exist separate from good. From the first cause came other beings that made life, souls, and spiritual essence. So from these beings came creator deities and eventually the other gods and goddesses which populate the world. And this makes me think a lot of, I included that quote of the Taoist quote, and it makes me think a lot of Taoism. In Taoism, there's this sort of the Tao, right? This unknowable thing. And from the Tao comes the three head gods of the Taoist pantheon, which are called the Sanxing. And then from the Sanxing, there come eventual other gods after that in kind of succession. And as they get more and more, they kind of specialize more and more and more to very specific things. So I see a lot of parallels between Neoplatonic thought and maybe Eastern philosophy and Taoist thought. The same principle can apply to the Wiccan concept that all gods are one god and all goddesses are one goddess. The Corellian tradition teaches that both god and goddess are one half of a larger whole or universal spirit, which is that deity, right? Which can maybe be seen as the first cause. So you see I'm drawing some parallels here, right? Between maybe what Neoplatonic thought believes and then what the Corellian tradition is agreeing on. Neoplatonists believed in reincarnation, in the idea of a lower self and an oversoul, maybe also known as the higher self, and of a spirit recycling to the universal spirit. This idea that once we die, eventually we will stop incarnating and will eventually return to the universal spirit. Those that recycle are not believed to reincarnate once reunited. So the idea is once we've reunited with the god and goddess, we're no longer, once we become pure spirit, we no longer incarnate in the physical form again. So how does maybe some of this relate to the Corellian tradition? The Corellian nativist tradition ascribes to the story of creation found in the Vangelo della Strega. The basis of this cosmology appears to mirror that of Neoplatonic thought, that a singular deity, first cause, created a cosmos full of spirits by separating from herself those souls which incarnated into matter, right? These separated souls are part of what's called an Ennead, So it's a 9-part system, which is outlined in third degree work. Essentially, the monad is a single part of the 9-part system. So to kind of explain that a little bit more in detail, if we compare again to Neoplatonic thought, right, there's the first cause. After the first cause, there came these larger beings. And so in the Correllian tradition, we see that as being the Aeneid. So the Aeneid is a group of 9, and there are different sort of soul families, right? Each monad, which is one of the 9 Aeneids, is a soul family. And each one of us is born into that kind of soul family. So each of the monads represent a particular point in creation when the created souls were sent to matter in order to achieve a very particular goal. So for example, one of the things that they talk about in the third degree is protonaria, which is the first monad. It's the monad that was created first. It's the goddess's initial separation of herself to send spirits into matter. So that initial moment when the goddess decided to separate the spirits from herself and send those spirits into incarnation, those first group of spirits are part of that first monad, okay? Spirits in this monad often carry characteristics of being goal-driven, focused, good at beginning projects, but sometimes maybe they struggle with completing their work or following through. Because they weren't able to follow through, right? They struggle with that. The goddess is like, hey, listen, I need some more people here. So she cut off from herself another group of spirits, which is the second monad. And then when she saw what was lacking there, she created a third group of spirits called the third monad, and so on and so forth. And there, according to the tradition, there are 9 total monad, the Aeneid, right? And so this again parallels that cycle of spirit and growth that happens in Neoplatonic thought. So to conclude this part of this brief part of the presentation, there is a system of personality types, which is called the Enneagram, which follows a very similar system as the Aeneid outlined by the Correllian tradition. So to learn about your personality type in this 9-part system, consider some of the following sources. There's a great book called The Enneagram in You. Another book is called The Road Back to You. And then you can even take a personality quiz online to figure out what your Enneagram is. Future reference, I'm a 3 Enneagram, which is the achiever. Let's kind of shift gears and talk a little bit about something outside of Neoplatonic thought and go through the Emerald Tablet. So the Emerald Tablet is a spiritual text, which is the foundation of alchemical practice. It was created by Hermes Trismegistus. Some people have thought that Hermes was actually the god Thoth. So you'll see there's a picture of Thoth here. The text is the foundation of much of Western metaphysical thought, so you'll see some things in here that might be really familiar to you. It outlines several magical principles which are important to the discussion on the element of spirit. So I have the entire Emerald Tablet here for us to review. It's very brief, so I will just go through each of it. It is true, and without falsehood, certain and most true, that which is above is like that which is below, and that which is below is like that which is above, to accomplish the miracles of one thing. And as all things were by contemplation of one, so all things arise from this one thing by a single act of adaptation. The father thereof is the sun, the mother, the moon. The wind carried it in its womb, the earth is the nurse thereof. It is the father of all works of wonder throughout the whole world. The power therefore is perfect. With great sagacity it doth ascend gently from earth to heaven. Again it doth descend to earth, and uniteth in itself the force from things superior and things inferior. So this sounds a lot like what the Correllians believe, right? We talk about this idea of evolution and involution, right? This idea that as we grow in life, we are evolving and evolving and evolving, eventually reaching to reunite with spirit. And then when we die and we reincarnate, we return back to our body and go back down into that, right? And so this idea of going to heaven and coming back to earth. So just something I want you to think about in terms of the Emerald Tablet. Now, there's another resource I want to share with you, the Kabbalion. Now, the Kabbalion is a text which is attributed to what's called the Three Initiates, which includes additional Western metaphysical principles, which can be found in much of Wiccan practice. So if the first cause, per Neoplatonic thought, is the essence of reason, then it aligns with the first principle of the Kabbalion, which is the principle of mentalism. The principle of mentalism says that everything is mind. Everything that exists is part of the mind of the creator. All of the known physical universe is the manifestation of spirit. I think we can all agree of that, right? It also states that spirit is immanent and immediately present. There's a verse in the Quran that says something like Allah is closer to you than your jugular, right? So like think of where your jugular is, right? The spirit, essence of spirit, is so close to us that it's literally us, right? So I want you to take just a moment, if you have any questions, to kind of think of them, and we'll talk about questions at the end of the presentation. So take just a moment if you have any questions to jot them down or kind of commit them to memory so that you can ask your questions at the end. And then we're going to conclude today's presentation with a meditation on connecting with the element of spirit. So I invite you to take just a moment to bring yourself back to your center again, like we did at the beginning of the ritual, and arrive in the present moment and find a nice comfortable position. You can close your eyes, you can leave them open, whatever is comfortable for you. If you have a veil, you can cover your head if that's better or easier for you, and just bring your attention into the breath, into the present moment. And I invite you to bring your awareness to your body and to your breath, becoming present in this moment. And I want you to imagine for just a moment that you're standing upon a path. And this path can be whatever way that it appears to you. It could be a path in the forest. It could be a walkway in front of a house. It can be whatever and however it appears to you. And you see the path stretch out before you. And you see that there's a staircase going directly upward. And you begin to walk toward the staircase. And as you walk toward the staircase, you begin to ascend the staircase. And as you ascend the staircase with every single step, you get closer and closer and closer to your divine self. And as we ascend the stairs, we remember that we are of spirit. We remember that we are part of spirit. We remember that we have a higher self, which is spirit and our connection to spirit. And at the top of the stairs, you see there is a barrier. This barrier is not a physical barrier. It's not a door or a window. It's an energetic or spiritual barrier. You can see this barrier like a curtain in front of the door, in front of the stairs. You can see it like a thick wall of jello. You can see it like rippling energy, like coming off of a fire. And you begin to walk toward that barrier. And you begin to press yourself into the barrier, and you can feel some resistance as you begin to work your way through the barrier. This is the veil. This is the barrier that separates your lower self from your higher self. And so as you begin to walk through that barrier, very slowly you trudge through, and you in some ways maybe feel stuck or suctioned or wanting to stay in your lower self. Try your best and your hardest to fight through this veil, this barrier, and cross the veil into a completely new space. And once you've completely passed over that veil and you've come up to the other side, I want you to take a moment to see how it looks to you, to feel how it feels to you. What is in this space? Is it a giant open space? Is it a field? Is it a room? Is it a simple open blank slate? What do you see in this room? And take a moment to see whatever it is that's coming to you, any messages that are coming to you. Imagine that your chakras are open and aligned. And as soon as you stepped across this veil, you opened yourself up to receiving all messages from Spirit. And take a moment to receive those messages. However they come, they may come as flashes of inspiration. They might come as images in your mind. They might come as physical sensations in your body. They might come as memories. Take a moment to allow yourself to be open on this side of the veil and allow Spirit to show itself to you, and rest for a moment in the essence of Spirit, in the essence of the divine. And when you feel that you've received these messages from Spirit, and when you feel that you have communed, enough with your higher self, I invite you to turn again toward the veil and see yourself passing through that veil back to the staircase. And as you begin to descend the stairs, you bring yourself again back into this present moment and into your body. 10, you're moving closer down the stairs. 9, you're becoming aware of your physical body. 8, you're beginning to settle into that body. 7, you begin to become aware of your breath as it goes in and as it comes out. 6, you begin to feel your body, your feet, and your hands. 5, you bring your awareness to the sounds in the room around you. 4, you can feel the chair upon your back and sitting. 3, you begin to ground yourself in your physical senses. 2, you come back to a place of awareness. And 1, we complete the meditation and you open your eyes. And so this is a brief meditation to help bring you in touch with Spirit, to bring you in touch with your own higher self, and to pass over that veil and to find a place of calm and focused spirituality to allow you to commune with the element of Spirit and with your higher self, which again brings those messages from the higher planes. And so use this meditation whenever you feel the need in order to bring you to a place of awareness. And so here are the references that I have that I use for some of the information that I got. And that concludes our presentation on the element of Spirit.